By sunrise, the entire kingdom believed Emily Carter was marrying the Alpha King, and Emily was the only person who knew the wedding had begun as a joke. The bells of Silvercrest started ringing at 4 in the morning, their thunder rolling over the sleeping city and shaking dust from the narrow window above Emily's cot. She woke to fists pounding on her door, silver light burning around her wrist, and 6 royal guards waiting in the corridor. Less than 3 hours earlier, she had been an invisible records clerk with ink on her fingers and $18 left until payday. Now Commander Mason Reed was draping a black cloak over her nightgown and telling her not to speak until the king had finished his announcement. "What announcement?" Emily whispered. No one answered. They hurried her through the palace, past servants already bowing, past nobles gathering in robes and slippers, past windows where thousands of lanterns were appearing below. By the time the balcony doors opened, the square was packed. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood stood beneath the royal crest, dressed in black, his broad shoulders rigid as the final bell faded. He did not look like a man trapped by an accident. He looked like a king about to declare war. Then he held out his hand to Emily. Every instinct told her to stop, to demand an explanation, to say the one word she had spent her entire life avoiding. No. Instead, with the whole kingdom watching, she placed her trembling fingers in his. The silver mark around her wrist flared, and a matching band of light appeared around his. The crowd gasped. Adrian's eyes locked on hers, dark and unreadable. Before dawn, he announced, his voice carrying across the square, "Emily Carter will be recognized as my lawful bride and the future Queen of Silvercrest." Cheers erupted below. Emily could barely breathe. She had never courted him. She had never agreed to marry him. Until tonight, she had never even spoken to him. She leaned closer, forcing the words through her tight throat. "Your Majesty, this is a mistake." His hand tightened around hers, not painfully, but firmly enough to stop her from pulling away. "No," Adrian said quietly, his calm more frightening than anger. "The mistake was allowing the council to learn that you signed my marriage license before I placed you under my protection." Emily stared at him. How had a document she signed as a dare become legally binding? Why did the mark on her skin respond to his touch? And if Adrian Blackwood truly wanted to protect her, why did his expression suggest he already knew exactly what her signature had awakened? 6 hours earlier, Emily Carter was still the kind of woman people forgot was in the room until they needed something from her. She sat alone beneath the green glass lamps of the Royal Records office, copying shipment totals into a ledger while the rest of the clerks prepared to leave for the palace celebration. The office occupied the lowest floor of the Western Administrative Wing, far from the marble halls and gold banners above. Down here, the walls were plain stone, the windows were narrow, and every clock seemed to tick louder after sunset. Emily preferred it that way. Quiet rooms did not ask questions. Ledgers did not laugh when she hesitated. Ink never punished her for saying the wrong thing. Carter called Mr. Bell, the senior clerk, without looking up from his coat buttons. "You will finish the winter grain reconciliation before you leave." Emily glanced at the stack he had placed beside her. It was at least 4 hours of work. "I was assigned the marriage registry tonight," she said carefully. Miss Foster was supposed to finish the grain records. Miss Foster was already standing by the door in a red dress, pretending not to listen. Mr. Bell finally looked at Emily. "Miss Foster has plans." Emily almost laughed. Everyone had plans. That did not make their work disappear. She had plans too, although hers were painfully ordinary. She wanted to go home before midnight. She wanted to eat something warmer than the apple in her desk drawer. She wanted to review the payment schedule for the debt her older brother had left in her name before disappearing west. Most of all, she wanted to keep this job. It paid $28 a week, enough to cover rent on her small palace apartment, send money to her mother, and make the minimum payment on a loan she had never agreed to take. "I also have an assignment upstairs," Emily said. The sentence came out too softly. Mr. Bell gave a tired sigh, as if she had wounded him by making him repeat himself. "You are dependable, Carter. Do not make me regret saying that." There it was. The word that had followed her since childhood. Dependable. Her mother used it when Emily gave up a new winter coat so her brother could have one. Her teachers used it when they asked her to stay late and clean up after other students. Her brother used it when he said he only needed her signature as a reference on a business loan. Dependable meant useful. Useful meant safe. Safe meant no one left angry. Emily lowered her eyes to the ledger. I will finish it. Miss Foster smiled with relief. You are a lifesaver. She said it as though Emily had volunteered. 20 minutes later, the office was nearly empty. Emily worked through the shipment reports, comparing dates, warehouse seals, and quantities. Numbers usually calmed her, but something in the grain records felt wrong. 3 deliveries listed for the Northern District carried identical authorization codes, even though they had supposedly been approved on different days. She pulled the original invoices from a cabinet and examined the ink beneath the lamp. The signatures matched too perfectly. Real signatures varied. Hands grew tired. Pens dragged. These looked copied. Emily made a note in the margin, then hesitated. Mr. Bell disliked questions, especially questions that might make the office look careless. She could ignore it. That was what people expected her to do. Instead, she removed a small card from her desk and wrote down every conflicting number. She slipped the card into her pocket. She did not yet know why, only that records told the truth when people did not, and someone had altered these. Still working. Grace Miller leaned around the doorway, silver earrings swinging beneath her dark curls. Unlike Emily, Grace seemed incapable of entering a room quietly. She wore a blue dress borrowed from her cousin and carried 2 paper cups of spiced cider. The celebration started an hour ago. Half the palace is upstairs pretending to adore Princess Caroline. Emily accepted the cider. I have to deliver the royal registry files before I can leave. Then I am helping. Grace picked up the top bundle. No, Emily reached for it. You are not authorized. Grace stared at her. Was that a no? Heat climbed Emily's neck. Grace's eyes widened theatrically. I should write down the date. I can say no. You can pronounce it. That is not the same thing. Grace glanced at the grain ledgers. Did Belle leave you Foster's work again? Emily busied herself tying the registry bundle. It needed to be finished. Emily, I need this job. You need a spine. The words were not cruel, but they landed where cruelty had already left a bruise. Emily tightened the cord until it pressed into her fingers. Some people cannot afford to disappoint everyone around them. Grace's expression softened. And some people learn that everyone around them will survive disappointment. Emily looked away. She remembered being 13 and telling her father she did not want to move schools. He had called her selfish. 2 weeks later, he left the family anyway. She remembered refusing her brother money once. He did not speak to her for a month. She remembered every cold silence that followed every boundary, and the lesson they had carved into her: love could be withdrawn. Approval could vanish. The safest answer was yes. I am not trying to fix your entire life tonight, Grace said. I am only trying to get you upstairs before the good food is gone. Emily finished tying the bundle. I am working. You have worked 12 hours. 11. That is not the defense you think it is. Grace took the registry files before Emily could stop her and marched into the corridor. Emily grabbed her coat and followed. As they climbed toward the upper palace, the stone walls gave way to polished wood, then white marble veined with silver. Music drifted down from the grand hall. Servants hurried past carrying flowers, champagne, and trays of food that cost more than Emily earned in a month. Tonight was meant to celebrate the proposed alliance between Alpha King Adrian Blackwood and Princess Caroline Ashford. Although the official announcement had not yet been made, everyone in Silvercrest knew it was coming. The kingdom needed stability. The council wanted an heir. Caroline came from a powerful Eastern family. It was the kind of marriage that looked perfect in records. Emily wondered whether anyone had asked the 2 people whose names would appear on the license. At the entrance to the administrative gallery, Mr. Bell appeared again. Carter, good. Counselor Hale needs the sealed marriage documents delivered to the old signing room. He handed her a black leather folder stamped with the royal crest. Do not open it. The old signing room is not on tonight's routing list, Emily said. Mr. Bell's mouth tightened. Are you questioning a council order? She felt Grace watching her. The correct answer rose to her lips. No, sir. Of course not. Instead, Emily looked at the seal. The wax bore Victor Hale's official mark, but the date pressed beneath it was yesterday's. I am asking because dated documents are normally logged before transfer. Mr. Bell's face changed. Only slightly, but enough. Surprise first. Then irritation. The council has waived the procedure. May I have that in writing? The corridor seemed to go silent around them. Emily's heart hammered so hard she could hear it. Mr. Bell stared at her, and for one terrible second she thought he would dismiss her on the spot. Then Grace coughed into her hand to hide what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Take the folder, Mr. Bell said coldly. Deliver it. Stop making simple tasks difficult. Emily accepted it because she still did not know how to risk everything for one unanswered question. But as he walked away, she noticed a faint smear of silver ink on his cuff. The same rare ink used only for royal oaths and binding documents. Grace leaned closer. You nearly told him no. Nearly does not count. It counts to me. They reached the old signing room at the end of an unused corridor. The chamber was empty except for a long table, a silver pen, and a single document waiting beneath the light. The folder in Emily's hands was suddenly lighter than it should have been. She opened it despite the instruction. It contained blank paper. That is strange, Grace whispered. Emily looked toward the document on the table. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood's name was already written across the first signature line in dark silver ink. Beneath it waited an empty space marked Bride. Grace read it, then turned to Emily with a grin. You know what everyone says about you? Several things, none of them flattering. They say Emily Carter would never do anything reckless. Emily placed the empty folder down. They are correct. Grace lifted the silver pen. Then prove them wrong. Sign it, laugh for 5 seconds, and we will tear it up. Emily should have refused. She should have examined the seal, checked the registry number, and asked why a royal marriage license had been left in an abandoned room. But somewhere beneath 12 hours of work, 24 years of obedience, and one lifetime of being called predictable, something small and tired wanted to surprise everyone. Just once. Emily took the pen. It is a joke, she said, more to herself than Grace. Then she wrote her name. The final stroke had barely touched the page when the ink flashed silver, the chamber doors locked, and a man's voice spoke from the darkness behind them. What, he asked with terrifying calm, did you just do to my marriage license? Grace spun toward the voice so quickly that the silver pen slipped from Emily's fingers and struck the floor with a clear metallic note. A man stepped from the shadowed alcove beside the fireplace, tall enough that the room seemed to narrow around him. He wore no crown, only a black formal coat with the royal wolf embroidered at the collar, but Emily recognized him at once. Everyone in Silvercrest knew Alpha King Adrian Blackwood's face from coins, newspapers, and the portraits hanging in every government building. None of those images captured the force of his presence. He did not need to raise his voice. The air itself appeared to wait for him. Emily's throat closed. Grace dropped into a curtsy. Emily tried to do the same, caught her heel against the edge of the rug, and nearly collided with the table. Adrian's gaze moved from her to the document. The silver ink had spread. Beyond Emily's signature, forming delicate lines across the page like frost on glass. Your Majesty, Emily managed. I can explain. Please do. His expression remained controlled, but something had changed in his eyes. A faint gold glow sharpened their dark color, then disappeared. Emily forced herself not to look away. I believe the document was a discarded draft. Grace made a small sound beside her. Emily corrected herself. No, that is not entirely true. I knew it was a marriage license, but I believed it was inactive. I signed it as a foolish joke. I take full responsibility. Adrian crossed the room. With each step, the mark around Emily's wrist grew warmer. She pulled her sleeve over it, but his attention dropped to the movement. Show me your hand. It sounded like an order because he was a king, but he did not reach for her. Emily hesitated, then held out her arm. The silver band circled her wrist like living ink. Adrian's jaw tightened. He turned his own hand upward. The same mark burned against his skin. Grace whispered, "That cannot be good." Adrian looked at her. "Leave us." Grace glanced at Emily, torn between fear and loyalty. "I signed it alone," Emily said quickly. She did not touch the document. "I know." Adrian's voice softened by only a fraction. "Commander Reed is outside. He will keep her safe." Grace did not move. Emily felt the old instinct rise within her, the need to make everyone comfortable, to prevent conflict before it began. Yet Grace had already risked enough. "Go," Emily told her. "I will be all right." Grace searched her face, then nodded and slipped through the door when Adrian released the lock. The moment it closed again, the silence changed. Emily became painfully aware that she was alone with the most powerful alpha in the kingdom and legally connected to him by something she did not understand. Adrian lifted the license by its edges. "This is not an ordinary civil document. It was created under the first royal marriage laws of Silvercrest. Then why was it left in an empty room? That is one of several questions I intend to answer." He studied the seal, then the blank folder Emily had carried. "Who gave you this?" "Assignment." Mr. Bell said Counselor Victor Hale ordered the delivery. "Did Hale speak to you directly?" No. Adrian looked toward the corridor, his expression becoming colder. Emily remembered the wrong date on the seal and the silver ink on Mr. Bell's cuff. "The folder was empty when I opened it," she added. "It may have been meant to bring me here without creating a real transfer record." Adrian's gaze returned to her. "You notice that? Records are my work. Most people in your position would be too frightened to think clearly. I am frightened." Her honesty surprised both of them. "I am simply frightened and paying attention at the same time." Something almost like approval passed over his face. He placed the license flat on the table. The signature activated Mu blood law. Once both names are written voluntarily, the document creates a temporary royal bond. Emily stared at him. "Voluntarily? I did not agree to marry you. You chose to sign. That is not the same thing." "Morally, no. Under the old law, apparently it is." Anger cut through her fear. "That law is absurd. On that point, we agree." The mark around her wrist pulsed again as if objecting to their criticism. Emily pressed her fingers against it. "Can it be removed?" Adrian did not answer immediately, and the pause frightened her more than anything he had said. "There are 3 possible responses before dawn," he said. "The first is to deny the validity of your signature." "Good. Do that. If I deny it, the council may charge you with attempting to forge a royal marriage claim. The punishment is permanent exile from Silvercrest, and your family's accounts would be frozen during the investigation." Emily's thoughts went to her mother's medicine, the apartment rent, and the debt payment due in 4 days. The old life she had tried so hard to protect suddenly balanced on the edge of one sentence. The second response? "We conceal the license and investigate privately." That sounds reasonable. It would be if the Moon Archive bell had not already sounded. Every council member within the palace knows a royal document was activated. Hale will demand to see the registry before sunrise. If we hide it, he can accuse me of violating succession law and use the scandal to force an emergency vote. Emily looked at the locked door. She understood now why Adrian seemed calm. He was not calm. He was calculating how many disasters could be prevented at once. "The third response is to recognize the license," she said. "Yes. Meaning announce that we are engaged. Meaning announce that we are legally bound until the Moon Court reviews the document." The room tilted slightly beneath her feet. Emily gripped the back of a chair. "How long?" 7 days. "And during those 7 days, you remain under royal protection. The council cannot arrest, question, or remove you without my consent. At the end of the period, the license can be confirmed or dissolved before the court. So you want me to pretend to be your bride? I want to keep you alive, keep Hale from taking control of the government, and discover who placed this document in your path." His tone was blunt, not romantic, and Emily was oddly grateful for that. "But yes, publicly, you would be treated as my bride." She laughed once, without humor. "Yesterday I was reconciling grain invoices. By breakfast I could be accused of trying to steal a crown. That is why we must act before breakfast." Adrian reached for the license, but Emily placed her hand over it first. His gaze dropped to her fingers. The silver mark flared where their hands nearly touched. "No," she said. The word came out thin, but it existed. Adrian went still. Emily's pulse raced. She had said it to an alpha king. She had said it while everything she loved was at risk. "No to which part?" he asked. "No to accepting a choice where every path has already been decided for me." She forced herself to continue before courage abandoned her. "You listed 3 outcomes. In each one, I become a criminal, a secret, or a wife. None of those are choices. They are consequences." Adrian studied her for a long moment. "What do you propose?" Emily had no answer ready. That had always been her problem. Saying yes required nothing. Saying no meant accepting the responsibility of imagining another way. She looked at the license, then at the empty folder, the silver pen, and the seal with yesterday's date. "We make the announcement," she said slowly. "But not as a permanent marriage. We call it a provisional royal union under investigation. You state publicly that the court will review it in 7 days. The council will object. Let them. If they object publicly, they must acknowledge the law exists. That prevents them from quietly accusing me of forgery tonight." Adrian's eyes sharpened. Emily continued, finding steadiness as the logic formed. "I stay under your protection, but I receive independent legal counsel. I keep access to the records office. I am allowed to examine every transfer connected to this license. And at the end of 7 days, I can request a solution without your permission. You are negotiating terms with your king. I am negotiating the use of my own name." The words hung between them. For the first time, Adrian looked at her not as an accident he needed to contain, but as a person he had underestimated. "There is one problem," he said. "Only one. The old law requires a royal bride to live inside the protected family wing until the hearing." Emily's stomach tightened. That meant leaving her apartment, her work routine, and every ordinary thing she understood. The door to her old life was already closing. If she agreed, there would be no pretending tomorrow had never happened. "Will I be free to leave after 7 days?" "If that is your decision, I will sign the dissolution myself." "And my family?" "Protected from investigation and financial retaliation." "Grace." "Protected." "My job." Adrian glanced at the glowing license. "Your current supervisor may find it difficult to assign you overtime." Despite herself, Emily almost smiled. Then the weight of the choice returned. She thought of Mr. Bell's cold face, her mother's bills, and the ledger card hidden in her pocket. She thought of the altered grain records and the possibility that the same people who had manipulated those numbers had placed this license here. Running would not restore her old life. It would only leave others to decide what happened to it. Emily lifted her chin. "Then I agree to 7 days. Not to a marriage. Not yet." Adrian held out his hand. 7 days. She looked at his palm. The mark around her wrist brightened, warm and insistent, but this time she did not move because someone expected her to. She moved because she had chosen the price. Emily placed her hand in his. The silver light raced across both their wrists, and somewhere high above them, the first bell began to ring. Adrian's fingers closed around hers as footsteps thundered in the corridor. "The council is coming," he said. "Once those doors open, Miss Carter, there will be no returning to anonymity." Emily's fear settled into something harder. "Then open them." The doors opened before Adrian could reach them. Counselor Victor Hale entered first, wrapped in a charcoal robe over formal evening clothes, his silver hair perfectly arranged despite the hour. 6 council members followed, along with Commander Mason Reed and 2 royal clerks carrying sealed ledgers. Victor's gaze moved immediately to Emily's hand in Adrian's, then to the glowing license on the table. Satisfaction flashed across his face so quickly that Emily might have missed it if she had not spent years studying tiny inconsistencies. "Your Majesty," Victor said, bowing just enough to remain respectful without appearing submissive. The Moon Archive bell was heard throughout the palace. "We feared someone had tampered with a royal document." Adrian did not release Emily. "Your concern has been noted." Victor approached the table. "May I examine the license?" No, the single word stopped him. Emily felt the difference between her no and Adrian's. Hers had required every scrap of courage she possessed. His landed like a locked gate. Victor's expression remained polite. The council has a legal obligation to verify any claim affecting the succession. You will verify it at the Moon Court in 7 days. Murmurs passed through the room. One councilwoman stared openly at Emily's plain gray dress and ink-stained fingertips. 7 days, Victor repeated. Surely your majesty is not suggesting that this clerk be recognized as a royal bride. Emily waited for Adrian to correct him, but the king's attention remained fixed on Victor. Miss Carter signed the license voluntarily. The document recognized her. Until the court rules otherwise, the law recognizes her as well. She may have been instructed to sign. Victor's gaze settled on Emily. Or paid. Heat rose beneath her skin, but she kept her face still. She knew men like him. They offered insults as questions so that any emotional response could be called guilt. No one paid me, she said. Victor lifted one eyebrow. You admit, then, that you knowingly signed the king's marriage license? I admit that I signed my name without understanding the document's power. A convenient distinction. An accurate one. Adrian's thumb shifted once against the back of her hand. The small movement sent warmth up her arm. Emily told herself it was only the mark responding, but her pulse did not believe her. Victor moved closer. Miss Carter, where did you obtain the license? It was waiting in this room. Who told you to come here? Emily could have named Mr. Bell immediately. That was what Victor expected. Instead, she studied him. His questions were too precise. He had not asked why she signed. He had asked where the license had been and who directed her. Council business brought me to this corridor, she said. The details will be included in my written statement. Victor's mouth tightened. You are refusing to answer the council? She is exercising the right to independent counsel, Adrian said. A right granted under Provisional Royal Union Review. Victor turned sharply. That law has not been used in more than a century. Then this will be educational for all of us. A few council members looked away to hide their reactions. Emily began to understand Adrian's reputation. He was not loud. He simply made resistance feel exhausting. Victor looked down at their joined hands. And does Miss Carter understand what provisional recognition requires? Emily answered before Adrian could. Residence in the protected family wing, access to independent counsel, full review of the document's transfer history, and the right to request dissolution at the end of 7 days. The councilwoman who had been staring at her blinked. Victor studied Emily with new caution. You have learned a great deal in a short time. I work in records. A clerk is not a lawyer. No, but clerks often know where lawyers hide their mistakes. Silence fell. Mason's mouth twitched. Adrian turned his face slightly, and Emily caught the faintest suggestion of amusement before it vanished. Victor did not smile. Your Majesty, a public announcement would create panic. Princess Caroline's family expects an alliance. Princess Caroline's family does not govern Silvercrest. They control the eastern trade routes. Then they may continue controlling them without controlling my marriage. Emily glanced at Adrian. Until this moment, she had assumed he wanted the match with Caroline and saw Emily only as an obstacle. The cold certainty in his voice suggested otherwise. Yet that did not mean he wanted Emily. A man could reject one cage without welcoming another. Victor lowered his voice. Think carefully, Adrian. If you present this woman to the kingdom, and the court later dissolves the bond, your authority will be weakened. The use of the king's first name changed the air. Adrian's fingers tightened around Emily's hand. Gold flared briefly in his eyes. A low pressure rolled through the room, not violent, but unmistakably inhuman. Several council members stepped back. Emily's body reacted before her mind did. The silver mark warmed, and a strange calm spread through her chest. At the same instant, Adrian's shoulders loosened. His gaze dropped to her. Surprise crossed his face. The room had noticed. Victor had noticed most of all. Interesting, he murmured. Emily pulled her hand away. The calm broke. Adrian's jaw set, but he did not reach for her again. That mattered. He could command armies, silence councils, and turn a room cold with one look, yet when she withdrew, he let her. The announcement will be made before dawn, Adrian said. The wording will state that the union is provisional pending formal review. Miss Carter will be protected by the Crown and granted access to all relevant records. Any attempt to question, detain, discredit, or relocate her without my authorization will be treated as interference with a royal investigation. Victor's eyes hardened. You are building a fortress around a stranger. Adrian looked at Emily, and for one breath the council disappeared from her awareness. Someone placed her in the path of a binding document. Until I know who and why, a fortress seems appropriate. The answer should have reassured her. Instead, it reminded Emily that she was both protected and trapped by the same walls. Victor bowed. As you wish, Your Majesty. The council will attend the announcement. He turned to leave, then paused beside Emily. 7 days pass quickly, Miss Carter. Be certain you understand what happens when a kingdom grows tired of a mistake. Before she could answer, Adrian stepped between them. Leave. Victor did. The other council members followed, their whispers beginning before the doors fully closed. Mason remained with the clerks. The square can be assembled within 2 hours, he said. The family wing is secure. We have also located Miss Miller. Emily's chest tightened. Is Grace safe? She is angry, loud, and demanding legal representation for you, Mason said. So yes. Relief loosened Emily's breath. Adrian gave instructions for Grace to be moved to a guarded guest room rather than detained. Then he dismissed the clerks and turned to Emily. You handled Hale well. I did not answer his questions. That is why you handled him well. She folded her arms, suddenly aware of how tired she was. You knew he would come. I knew the council would come. I did not know Hale would arrive first. But you suspect him. I suspect anyone who benefits from chaos. That must be a long list in a palace. It grows daily. Mason returned with a velvet case. Inside lay a narrow silver ring marked with the Blackwood crest. Emily stared at it. No, Adrian looked at her. It is not a wedding ring. It looks remarkably committed for something that is not a wedding ring. It is a protection seal. It allows you to pass the family wing guards and identifies you as under direct royal authority. Which means everyone who sees it will assume I belong to you. They will assume harming you is unwise. That is not the same thing. No, Adrian said. But tonight it may. Keep you alive. Emily hated that he was right. She hated even more that he did not use his certainty to force her. He simply held the case and waited. After a long moment, she took the ring herself and slid it onto her finger. The silver mark around her wrist glowed once, then settled. Adrian's gaze followed the light. Does that happen with every royal license? She asked. No, then what does it mean? I do not know. He answered too quickly. Emily looked at him. His face was unreadable, but the mark on his wrist had brightened to match hers. You're lying. Mason became very interested in the far wall. Adrian's expression cooled. You have known me for less than an hour. Long enough to see that you pause before facts and answer quickly when hiding them. For the first time, the Alpha King looked caught off guard. Then he gave a quiet breath that might almost have been a laugh. You truly are a records clerk. And you are avoiding the question. The mark suggests the license recognizes more than signatures. I need confirmation before I tell you anything else. Confirmation from whom? The royal archivist. Emily's stomach sank. The archive is closed until sunrise. Not to me. He offered his hand again. This time she did not take it. I can walk without royal assistance. I am aware. They left the signing room side by side, Mason following several steps behind. The palace corridors had changed in the minutes since the bell. Servants stood against the walls, watching Emily with curiosity, disbelief, and open judgment. A maid carrying folded linens nearly dropped them when she saw the ring. 2 noblemen stopped speaking as Emily passed. She felt every glance like a hand pressing against her back. Adrian moved through the attention as if it did not exist. Emily wondered whether power meant never noticing judgment or simply never having to fear it. At the entrance to the private archive, 2 guards bowed and opened the iron doors. The royal archivist, an elderly woman named Margaret Finch, waited inside in a wool robe, her white hair braided over one shoulder. She looked first at Adrian, then at Emily, then at the matching marks. Her face lost all color. "Where did you find that license?" she asked. "In the old signing room," Adrian said. Margaret gripped the edge of her desk. "That is impossible. I sealed it in the moon vault 19 years ago." Emily felt the ring grow cold against her finger. "Then someone removed it." Margaret's eyes fixed on her. "Someone did more than that. The license cannot awaken for just any two signatures." Adrian's voice hardened. "Explain." The archivist looked between them with something close to fear. "The document only responds when the royal bloodline recognizes a compatible bond." Emily's heartbeat stumbled. Adrian went very still. Margaret continued, each word making the room feel smaller. "Whoever placed that license before Miss Carter did not merely hope she would embarrass the king. They believed her signature might bind him." Margaret Finch closed the iron doors of the royal archive and turned the key with shaking fingers. "No one outside this room can know what I just told you," she said. "Not yet." Adrian's expression hardened. "Why?" "Because if someone knew Miss Carter's signature could awaken the license, then someone knew more about the royal bloodline than they should." Emily looked down at the silver band around her wrist. "And if they were wrong?" Margaret met her eyes. "Then the document would have remained ordinary paper." The answers settled heavily in the room. Someone had not simply arranged a prank. Someone had tested her. Adrian ordered Mason to double the archive guard and move every record connected to the Moonblood laws into the protected family wing. Margaret protested that some volumes had not left the vault in more than a century. Adrian replied that history could survive a short walk. Emily watched him give orders with effortless authority, each command answered before the last had fully left his mouth. It would have been easy to stand beside him and let that power solve everything. That thought frightened her more than the council. "I need the transfer log from yesterday," she said. Margaret blinked. Now, whoever removed the license had to move through at least 3 controlled doors. Even if the official record was altered, the surrounding entries may show a gap. Adrian looked at her. "You have been awake most of the night. So has the person trying to frame us." The word "us" slipped out before she could stop it. Something unreadable moved across Adrian's face. He nodded once. "Find what you need." For the next hour, Emily worked at Margaret's desk while Adrian remained across the room reviewing old legal texts. It was the first time she had ever seen a king wait for a clerk. She compared ink shades, page pressure, and numbering patterns until a small inconsistency emerged. One entry listed a linen delivery at 1:14 in the morning, but the palace laundry used blue ink. This line was black. She held the page closer to the lamp. This was added later. Adrian came to her side. His shoulder nearly brushed hers, and the silver mark warmed. Emily shifted half a step away. "How can you tell?" "The handwriting imitates the archivist's assistant, but the downward strokes are too careful. People forge shapes, not habits." Margaret leaned over the page. "The assistant is left-handed. Whoever wrote this is not." Emily traced the false entry. The linen cart would have been large enough to move a locked document case. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Who had access to the service corridor? Margaret named 7 people. One was Mr. Bell. Another worked directly for Victor Hale. The others were palace servants with no obvious connection. Emily copied every name onto a clean sheet. The moment she finished, a bell sounded from the upper hall. Mason opened the door. "Your Majesty, the square is ready." Adrian looked toward the dark windows. "Then we announce before Hale controls the story." Emily's stomach tightened. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of cold air, ringing bells, and thousands of faces. By the time the balcony doors closed behind them, her hands had gone numb. Adrian led her away from the public gallery through a private passage lined with portraits of queens who all looked as though they had been born knowing where to place their hands. Emily had spent the announcement trying not to stare at the crowd. She had failed. She had seen disbelief, mockery, curiosity, and in one woman's face, pity. "You did not faint," Adrian said. "Was that a possibility? 3 royal fiancés have fainted on that balcony in the last 50 years. Comforting. 2 recovered. Emily stopped walking. Adrian stopped too. Then the corner of his mouth moved. It was not a full smile, but it changed his face enough to make her forget what she had planned to say. The reaction annoyed her. You made a joke. I have been accused of worse. Frequently, I imagine. They resumed walking. At the entrance to the protected family wing, a row of servants waited beside trunks of dresses, shoes, and formal coats. A severe woman in plum-colored silk stepped forward. Miss Carter, I am Helena Price, mistress of the royal household. We have less than 5 hours before the council breakfast. You must be measured, dressed, instructed, and presented. Emily stared at the trunks. I own clothes. Helena's gaze traveled over her plain dress. Technically. Adrian's expression cooled. Miss Carter will be treated with respect. Helena bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. The words were proper. The tone was not. Emily felt the familiar urge to shrink, smile, and make the tension disappear. Instead, she looked at Helena. I understand that I need appropriate clothing. I do not need to be insulted while receiving it. The servants went silent. Helena's face shifted from surprise to appraisal. Very well, she said. We begin with measurements. Adrian left for a security briefing, and Emily spent the next hour enduring ribbons, fabric samples, and instructions about posture. The first test arrived when Helena presented 3 formal gowns. One was silver and elegant. One was pale blue and covered in pearls. The third was black with a high collar and a train long enough to sweep an entire hallway. The black, Helena said. It projects authority. Emily examined the hem. It also weighs at least 12 pounds. Royal women endure discomfort. Royal women still need to walk. Helena looked offended. Emily chose the silver gown. When Helena objected, Emily asked which regulation required the black one. There was none. The room changed after that. The servants stopped treating her like a doll and began asking what she preferred. It was a small victory, but Emily felt it settle somewhere deep inside her. By mid-morning, she entered the council breakfast wearing silver, carrying the copied transfer list inside her sleeve. Adrian stood at the head of the long table. Princess Caroline Ashford sat to his right, composed and beautiful in dark green. Victor Hale sat to his left. Every conversation stopped when Emily entered. Adrian pulled out the chair beside him. Miss Carter. She sat. Caroline studied her with calm gray eyes. You are younger than I expected. I was not expecting any of this, so we are even. A few people looked shocked. Caroline's mouth curved slightly. Victor did not react. Breakfast began under a pressure that made every clink of silverware sound too loud. Council members questioned Emily about her education, family, income, and employment. Each question wore the mask of courtesy. Your brother's debt is substantial, Victor observed. A royal marriage would solve that problem. Emily set down her cup. It would also solve yours if your goal is to make poverty look like motive. Adrian's hand stilled beside his plate. Victor smiled. You are quick. I have had practice answering people who mistake rudeness for authority. Caroline looked down to hide a smile. The second test came when a servant placed a cup of tea before Emily. She lifted it and caught an unfamiliar bitter scent beneath the honey. Her hand paused. Adrian noticed immediately. What is it? This is not the tea served to everyone else. The room froze. The servant went pale. Victor leaned back. Perhaps Miss Carter is unfamiliar with palace blends. Emily examined the cup. The tea is ordinary. The honey is not. She looked at the small silver spoon. A faint cloudy film coated its edge. It came from a different tray. Mason stepped forward and quietly removed the cup. No one drank anything after that. The servant insisted she had followed instructions from the kitchen steward. The steward claimed the order carried Helena's seal. Helena denied sending it. Within minutes, the breakfast became an investigation. Adrian ordered Emily moved immediately to the Moon Tower, the most secure set of rooms in the palace. That is unnecessary, she said when they were alone in the adjoining corridor. Someone tampered with your drink within hours of the announcement. Which means locking me away gives them exactly what they want. I need access to the records. You will have it in the tower. And freedom to leave? His silence answered. Emily stopped walking. You promised protection, not imprisonment. Gold flickered in Adrian's eyes. I will not gamble with your safety. Then do not make decisions about my life without me. The words struck harder than she intended. Adrian went very still. You think I am trying to control you. I think you are used to protecting people by deciding what they are allowed to do. For a moment, the king and the woman beneath the title looked at each other without the court between them. Adrian's voice lowered. If I am wrong, you are inconvenienced. If you are wrong, someone reaches you before I can stop them. Then give me guards, not a cage. The mark around her wrist pulsed. Adrian looked at it, then at her. 2 guards. You may leave the tower with Mason or me. You keep access to the archive. You do not accept food or drink unless it has been tested. Agreed. And you tell me before you investigate anyone alone. Emily hesitated. Agreed. You almost lied. I almost negotiated. The faintest smile returned. There is a difference? A significant one. The moon tower stood above the eastern wing, connected to the king's private rooms by a guarded library. Emily discovered that her chamber had a fireplace, a writing desk, and windows overlooking the entire city. It was larger than her apartment and somehow less comforting. Grace was waiting inside, pacing in front of the hearth. The moment Emily entered, Grace rushed forward and hugged her. You signed one document and became impossible to reach. That is an unfair summary. It is an accurate summary. Grace pulled back and examined the silver gown. You look terrifyingly respectable. I was almost served suspicious honey. Grace's humor vanished. Emily told her what had happened, leaving out Margaret's most dangerous revelation. The fewer people who knew, the safer Grace would be. Yet hiding the truth felt too much like the habits Emily had criticized in Adrian. There is more, she admitted. The license should not have responded to me unless someone believed it would. Grace sat slowly. Someone chose you before you chose anything. Emily nodded. The idea made her skin feel cold. That afternoon, the 3rd test arrived disguised as work. Adrian brought the grain records to the tower library. You mentioned altered shipments, he said. Emily pulled the card from her pocket. 3 northern deliveries share the same authorization code. They spread the ledgers across a long table. For 2 hours, they worked side by side. Adrian knew trade routes and political agreements. Emily knew records, habits, and the way people tried to hide theft inside ordinary numbers. Together they found 7 missing shipments and a chain of false approvals leading through companies connected to Victor's allies. The stolen grain explained rising food prices in the northern district. It also gave Victor a reason to fear a records clerk who noticed too much. This may be why Belle wanted you distracted, Adrian said. Or removed. Emily looked at the list of names from the archive. One appeared in both investigations. Thomas Vale, Victor's private secretary. Before she could say it, the lights flickered. A sharp wave of pressure filled the library. Adrian gripped the edge of the table. His eyes flashed gold, brighter than before. The wolf beneath his skin had risen close enough that Emily could feel it like a storm in the room. Mason reached for the door, but Adrian raised one hand. Stay back. His voice sounded strained. Emily should have moved away. Instead, she remembered the council chamber, the way the mark had warmed when she touched him. She stepped closer. Adrian. His gaze snapped to her. Do not. You calmed when I held your hand. That does not mean it is safe. Neither is letting this continue. She placed her palm against his wrist. The silver bands flared. The pressure vanished so quickly that the silence afterward felt enormous. Adrian's breathing slowed. His fingers turned beneath hers and closed gently around her hand. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Emily became aware of every point of contact, the warmth of his skin, the careful restraint in his grip, the way his attention had narrowed entirely to her. It was not romantic. It could not be. It was magic, danger, and a problem they did not understand. Her pulse disagreed. She withdrew first. Adrian let her go. You need me nearby, she said. He looked toward the dark window. Apparently. Then we establish rules. Rules. 3. No lying about the bond. No touching unless necessary. And neither of us makes decisions for the other. Adrian studied her. You expect those rules to survive 7 days? They will if we respect them. A knock sounded at the library door. Mason entered carrying a sealed envelope. This was found beneath Miss Carter's pillow. Emily's stomach dropped. The guards searched the room while Adrian opened the envelope with a cloth. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message had been written in silver ink. The king's bride should stop reading records that do not concern her. Beneath the warning was a copy of her mother's home address. Adrian's calm disappeared. The tower is compromised. Emily looked at the address, then at the ledgers on the table. Fear pressed hard against her ribs, but beneath it something else had begun to form. Whoever had chosen her expected a frightened clerk who could be pushed, blamed, and silenced. They did not understand that Emily had spent her life preserving details everyone else ignored. She folded the copied address and placed it beside the false shipment codes. Then we stop waiting for them to make the next move, she said. We find out who entered this room. The message beneath Emily's pillow changed the rules before either of them could pretend the danger was distant. Adrian ordered the moon tower sealed, but Emily refused to be moved again until the room had been searched with her present. You said neither of us would make decisions for the other, she reminded him. That rule becomes inconvenient when someone has your mother's address. Inconvenient is not the same as optional. His eyes flashed gold, but he stepped aside. It was the first time she saw him choose restraint while fear was controlling him. Mason inspected the windows, fireplace, servant passages, and wardrobe while Emily examined the room as if it were a damaged record. Nothing appeared disturbed. That was the problem. Whoever had entered knew how to leave a space looking untouched. Grace stood near the door with her arms folded tightly across her chest. The pillow was changed after we arrived, she said. The first one had blue stitching. This one is white. Helena was summoned. She confirmed the linens had been delivered by a temporary maid whose name did not appear on the household schedule. Emily asked for every laundry request from the past week. Adrian looked at her. You think the intruder used the same route as the license. People repeat methods that work. She turned the warning over beneath the lamp. The silver ink looked royal, but the paper carried a faint watermark from a private mill in the Eastern District. Caroline's family controlled that district, which made the clue feel almost too convenient. Emily did not trust convenient evidence anymore. Someone wants us looking east, she said. Adrian studied the page. Toward Caroline. Or away from Victor. He nodded, and the simple agreement warmed her more than it should have. He did not dismiss her because she lacked rank. He did not explain her own work back to her. He listened. By afternoon, Emily had been awake nearly 30 hours. She refused food until it was tested, then forgot to eat after the tray arrived. Adrian noticed. He moved the ledgers aside and placed a bowl of soup in front of her. Eat. That sounds like an order. It is a request spoken by a man who has watched you ignore the same bowl for 40 minutes. You are watching me? You are sitting directly across from me. That is not an answer. Eat, Emily. It was the first time he used her first name. The sound of it in his voice was quiet, almost careful. She lifted the spoon before she could examine why that mattered. The soup was warm and simple, chicken with rice and herbs, nothing like the elaborate dishes served upstairs. I asked the kitchen for something you would recognize, he said. How did you know what I would recognize? Grace told Mason. Mason told me. The palace has an alarming intelligence network. It has improved since you arrived. She looked down to hide a smile. That evening, they followed the false linen request into the service tunnels below the eastern wing. Emily wanted to go because the paper trail ended there. Adrian wanted her nowhere near it. Their argument lasted 6 minutes and ended with a compromise neither liked. Emily would lead the record search while Adrian and Mason remained within sight. The tunnels smelled of stone, soap, and damp wood. Shelves held delivery books dating back decades. Emily found the relevant volume beneath 3 newer ledgers, which meant someone had hidden it in a hurry. A page had been cut out. That seems conclusive, Mason said. Only if the missing page contained what we think it did, Emily replied. She ran her finger along the binding. But whoever removed it left the thread. She asked for a lamp, then tilted the book toward the light. Pressure marks from the missing page remained on the one beneath it. Adrian watched as she placed a thin sheet over the impressions and shaded it gently with charcoal. A partial list emerged, room numbers, times, and one set of initials. T.V. Thomas Vale. Victor's secretary, Adrian said. Possibly. Emily pointed to a second mark near the edge. But this symbol is not from the council office. It belongs to the royal household. The trail involved more than one person. Adrian's expression darkened. Someone inside my household helped them enter your room. Which means dismissing everyone would warn the guilty person. You object to every efficient solution I offer. Only the ones that create 10 new problems. Mason coughed into his fist. Adrian glanced at him. You may leave us. Absolutely not, Emily said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You want the commander to remain? I want a witness when I point out that you are trying to intimidate him for agreeing with me. For one suspended second, Adrian stared at her. Then he laughed. It was a low, surprised sound, brief but real. The tunnels seemed warmer. After it, Emily realized she had never imagined an alpha king laughing. Kings in portraits did not laugh. They issued decrees, accepted swords, and looked disappointed in future generations. Adrian's smile faded slowly as he met her eyes. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with law or danger. Emily looked back at the ledger. We should continue. Yes, he said, although neither of them moved immediately. The first true intimacy came later, not in a ballroom or beneath moonlight, but in the tower library while rain pressed against the windows. Adrian had been silent for too long. Emily noticed because his silence had changed from concentration to strain. His hand tightened around the edge of the table, and the mark on his wrist glowed beneath his sleeve. You're wolf again, she said. It will pass. That is what people say when they do not want help. You're tired. So are you. A growl seemed to vibrate beneath his breath. He turned away from her. Do not come closer. Emily stopped. Their second rule held between them, no touching unless necessary. The room filled with the pressure of his power, heavier than before. A glass trembled on the table. She could feel his effort to contain it. What triggers this? She asked. Lack of sleep. Threats. The bond. Me? Not you. He closed his eyes. The possibility of losing control near you. The confession stripped the distance from him. He was not afraid of hurting the kingdom. He was afraid of frightening her. Emily moved one step closer. Tell me what helps. Distance. That is clearly failing. Emily, tell me the truth. His breathing slowed by force. Contact with you calms the wolf. But every time it happens, the bond grows stronger. And that is dangerous because... He looked at her then. Because I do not know where the bond ends and my own desire begins. The honesty hit her with more force than any polished declaration could have. She had spent her life around people who disguised need as obligation. Adrian named his uncertainty even when it weakened him. I do not know either, she said. That makes two of us. She offered her hand without touching him. The choice remained his. Adrian stared at her palm, then placed his hand in hers. The silver marks brightened. The pressure vanished. His shoulders lowered, and the gold receded from his eyes. Emily expected relief. Instead, awareness spread through her, warm and unsettling. His thumb rested against her knuckles. His hand was larger than hers, but he held her as if strength meant nothing unless carefully controlled. Better, she asked. No, her heart stumbled. No, calmer. His gaze dropped briefly to their joined hands. Not better. She understood what he meant, and heat climbed into her face. She withdrew first. Adrian released her immediately. Their third rule survived by a narrow margin. The next morning brought the first public reward and the first public threat. Adrian insisted Emily attend a meeting about the missing grain shipments. Victor objected to her presence. A provisional bride has no authority over trade policy. A records clerk found the theft your council missed, Adrian said. She stays. Emily presented the altered authorizations to the trade ministers. One dismissed her as inexperienced. Another suggested the shortages were clerical errors. Emily asked them to explain why 7 shipments listed as delivered had no stable receipts, no unloading fees, and no winter storage charges. The room went quiet. Then she produced the copied initials and the mill watermark. Someone is moving documents through private supply channels. The stolen grain and the license may be part of the same network. Adrian did not interrupt or take over. He stood behind her chair and let her finish. For the first time in her life, a powerful man used his presence to make others listen rather than to speak in her place. The ministers authorized an emergency audit. 3 northern warehouses were reopened before sunset, and enough hidden grain was found to lower market prices across the district. The news spread quickly. By evening, servants were calling Emily the paper queen. At first it sounded mocking. Then a kitchen maid thanked her because bread had become affordable again. Emily carried that small gratitude with her into the private dining room. Adrian had arranged dinner for only the 2 of them, though the doors remained open and Mason stood outside. "Is this another security measure?" she asked. "You complained that council meals interfere with eating." "I made an observation." Repeatedly. He poured her tea himself, then set the honey beside her without adding it. Tested. Twice. She noticed he had remembered she preferred to choose the amount. It was such a small thing that it hurt. Small considerations were dangerous because they felt like care before anyone had promised it. "Why did you sign the license first?" she asked. His hand paused around his cup. "Margaret said it had been sealed for 19 years. Your signature must have been there before that." "That is a question for another day." "That sounds like a violation of Rule 1. It is an incomplete answer, not a lie. A distinction favored by kings and guilty children." He almost smiled, but the expression faded. "I signed it when I was 13. Emily had not expected that. "Why?" "My father believed the crown had the right to decide every part of a royal life. He planned my marriage before I was old enough to understand the word." Adrian looked toward the rain-dark window. "I found the old license and signed it as an act of rebellion. I thought if my name was already bound to an impossible document, no one could force another contract on me. Did it work? For a time. Then my father sealed it away and told me choice was a luxury kings could not afford." Emily heard the old wound beneath the calm words. Adrian's cage had been larger than hers, lined with power instead of fear, but it was still a cage. "And now the same document has trapped you again," she said. His eyes met hers. Not in the same way. The silence between them deepened. Emily looked down at her tea. "My brother once asked me to sign a loan guarantee. He said it was temporary. He said family helped family. And he left you with the debt." Yes. She had never told anyone the whole truth. "I knew something was wrong. I signed anyway because he stopped speaking to me whenever I refused him. I thought losing money would hurt less than losing my brother." "Did it?" "I lost both." Adrian's face changed, not with pity, but anger on her behalf. "He used your love as leverage." "I let him." "Those are not the same thing." The words reached a place in her that had been blamed for years. Emily's throat tightened. Adrian did not tell her to forgive herself. He did not call her foolish. He simply refused to let another person's manipulation become evidence against her worth. The distance between them suddenly felt unbearable. She stood, not because she meant to leave, but because sitting still had become impossible. Adrian rose too. They were close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. The bond stirred, but it did not pull. This was not magic forcing her forward. This was choice, desire, and fear standing in the same room. Adrian lifted one hand, then stopped before touching her face. "May I?" No one had ever asked her that gently. Emily nodded. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The contact was brief, careful, and more intimate than any demand could have been. Her breath caught. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. She wanted him to kiss her. That truth came fast and clear. It frightened her because wanting had always been followed by surrender. "No," she whispered. Adrian stepped back at once. No disappointment sharpened his face. No cold silence punished her. He simply lowered his hand. "All right." Emily stared at him. "You are not angry. You said no." Most people hear that as rejection. It is a boundary, not an insult. The answer opened something inside her that she had not known was locked. Her eyes burned, and she looked away before he could see. But Adrian saw everything. He did not move closer. He gave her the space she had asked for. That was the moment the cost changed. Until then, losing Adrian had meant losing protection, access, and perhaps her place in Silvercrest. Now it meant losing the first person who had ever made her feel safe. A knock sounded from the corridor. Mason entered carrying a recovered household ledger. "We found the maid who delivered the pillow," he said. She was paid through an account connected to Thomas Vale. Adrian's expression became cold again. "Where is Vale?" "Gone. He left the palace before dawn using Princess Caroline's carriage authorization." Emily looked at the Eastern Mill watermark, then toward the rooms assigned to Caroline's household. The evidence was aligning too perfectly. "He wants us to accuse her," Emily said. "Why?" Mason handed her the ledger. One payment had been marked with a symbol Emily recognized from the grain records. Beside it was a date 3 days in the future. The date of the Moon Court hearing. Adrian read the entry over her shoulder. Whatever they planned did not end with the license. Emily felt the warmth of him beside her and understood the new danger with painful clarity. Someone had bound them together to create a scandal, but now the bond was becoming real enough to hurt. And in 3 days, whoever had started this intended to make sure one of them paid for it. The date in the ledger led Emily back to the Moon Vault, where the oldest marriage laws of Silvercrest were kept behind 3 iron doors and a lock that opened only for royal blood. Margaret Finch met them there before dawn, carrying a ring of keys and an expression that made Emily's stomach tighten. "I found the missing volume," the archivist said. "Or rather, I found where someone returned it." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "Returned it." Margaret unlocked the final door. "The shelf dust was disturbed this morning. Whoever borrowed it wanted us to discover it now." Inside the vault, the air smelled of old paper, cold stone, and cedar oil. Margaret placed a narrow black book on the table. Its cover bore no title, only a silver crescent pressed into the leather. Emily opened it carefully. The pages described the first royal unions, when marriage licenses were not merely contracts, but magical tests meant to prevent a ruler from binding an unwilling mate. "That does not sound like the law we are dealing with," Emily said. "Because the law changed," Margaret replied. "Kings kept the magic and removed the protections." Adrian's jaw tightened. Emily continued reading until one paragraph stopped her. A royal moon blood license could be rejected by either signer within 1 hour of activation. No council hearing. No punishment. No public declaration. A single refusal spoken before the document would dissolve the temporary bond. Emily read the passage twice. Then a third time, hoping the words would change. They did not. She looked at Adrian. He had gone completely still. "You knew." It was not a question. Margaret lowered her eyes. Mason took one careful step toward the door, as if giving them privacy without openly leaving. Adrian did not deny it. "I knew the clause existed." The room seemed to narrow around Emily. "When?" "Within minutes of your signature." Her pulse struck hard against her throat. "Before you gave me those 3 choices?" "Yes." "Before you told me the only ways forward were exile, secrecy, or public recognition?" "Yes." The honesty should have mattered. It did not. Not yet. Emily closed the book with trembling hands. Every moment since the signing room shifted in meaning. His urgency. His protection. The announcement. The 7-day agreement she had believed she negotiated from an impossible position. There had been another door, and he had kept it hidden. "You could have ended it," she said. "You could have freed me before the council ever entered that room. I could have dissolved the license." "That is what I said." "It would not have freed you from the danger." Adrian's voice remained controlled, but something strained beneath it. The bell had already sounded. Hale already knew a royal document had activated. "If the license vanished, he would still have accused you of forgery, and I would have had no legal basis to protect you." "You do not know that." "I knew enough." "No. You decided enough." The words echoed through the vault. Adrian accepted them without flinching. That made her angrier. "There was another reason," she said. His silence confirmed it. Emily looked down at the silver mark around his wrist. The bond calmed your wolf. Margaret turned away. Mason's expression hardened with understanding. Adrian answered quietly. Yes. The truth landed exactly where Emily had feared it would. Her brother had needed her signature to secure a loan. Mr. Bell had needed her obedience to finish other people's work. Now Adrian had needed her presence to control something dangerous inside himself. Different men. Different rooms. The same terrible pattern. She was valuable when useful. So you kept me, she said. That is not what happened. You hid the 1-hour clause because ending the bond would have cost you something. At first, yes. The words hurt more because he did not soften them. At first, Emily asked. When you signed, my wolf recognized the bond immediately. It had been unstable for months. That night was the first time it became quiet. He took a breath. I also knew the council had been pressuring me to marry Caroline. Keeping the license active blocked them from forcing the alliance. I used the situation. Emily's fingers curled against the book. And now? His gaze held hers. Now I would protect you even if the bond vanished. Now I trust your judgment more than most people who have served me for years. Now the thought of you leaving this palace has nothing to do with the wolf. The words reached her, but trust once cracked did not mend because someone spoke beautifully beside the pieces. You should have told me. Yes. You broke the first rule. Yes. And the third. Neither of us makes decisions for the other. Adrian looked at the floor for one brief moment. Yes. Emily had never seen him lower his eyes to anyone. The gesture did not erase what he had done. It made the pain more complicated. Margaret touched the closed volume. There is another entry you should read. Emily wanted to leave. Instead, she opened the book again. Halfway down the next page, a passage explained why the license had responded to her. It did not awaken simply because two compatible people signed. It awakened only when the royal bloodline recognized a bond capable of stabilizing succession magic. In older terms, a true royal mate. Emily read the phrase silently. Adrian's presence beside her suddenly felt too close. Does this mean the bond chose us? She asked. Margaret hesitated. It means the magic recognized a possibility, not a command. Compatibility is not consent, and fate is not the same as love. Emily was grateful for the distinction. She needed it desperately. Then she noticed a handwritten note in the margin added. In newer ink. The Blackwood heir signed first at age 13. License sealed by order of King Alastair. Activation requires second signer from the Carter maternal line. Emily stopped breathing. My family name is written here. Adrian leaned over the page. His face changed. That note was not in the original record. Margaret examined the ink. It was added recently. Emily's mind raced. Someone had not chosen a random clerk. Someone had researched her mother's bloodline, found the dormant license, moved it into her path, and arranged for her to be challenged into signing. The joke had been engineered. Who knew about my mother's family? Emily asked. The census office. Tax records. Employment registry. She looked at Adrian. And the council. Mason moved toward the door. I will place every office under review. Wait, Emily said. The too perfect evidence returned to her thoughts. Thomas Vale. Caroline's carriage authorization. The Eastern watermark. Every clue had pointed where someone wanted them to look. If Victor planned this, why reveal the Carter line now? Adrian understood first. Because he wants us to know the bond is real. Why? Margaret turned several pages forward. A second handwritten edition appeared beneath the hearing procedures. If the royal pair confirms the bond at Moon Court, all emergency powers transfer to the council until the marriage is formally consummated and crowned. Emily felt cold spread through her. He does not want the marriage dissolved, she said. He wants it confirmed. Adrian's expression became lethal in its stillness. Then he gains temporary control of the crown. And once he has control, Mason added, he can declare either of you unfit. The threat had changed. Victor was not trying to embarrass Adrian with an accidental bride. He was using Emily to create a legal path to the throne. The missing grain, the forged records, the warning in her room, Even the attack on her tea had all pushed them toward fear, dependence, and public confirmation. Emily looked at the silver marks binding them. What she had believed was the problem was actually the weapon. Adrian reached for her, then stopped before touching her. Emily. She stepped back. The pain in his face was immediate, but he honored the distance. Do not, she said. Not until I know which choices are mine and which ones you made for me. He lowered his hand. What do you want to do? For the first time since the signing room, he asked before acting. Emily looked at the altered book, the future court date, and her own name written into a plan that had begun before she ever touched the pen. Her old goal had been to escape the marriage without losing her life. That was no longer enough. We stopped trying to prove the license was an accident, she said. We proved someone designed it. Adrian's eyes met hers. And Hale. Emily closed the book. We let him believe we are still walking into his court exactly as planned. For the next 24 hours, Emily and Adrian pretended everything was proceeding exactly as Victor expected. They attended the legal briefing together, allowed the counsel to see the silver marks on their wrists, and offered no public objection when the Moon Court hearing was moved forward to the following morning. Behind closed doors, Mason searched Victor's offices, Margaret compared every alteration in the old law book, and Grace traced the palace delivery records. Emily told herself that the distance between her and Adrian was strategic. It was easier than admitting she no longer knew how to stand near him without remembering that he had hidden her one chance to walk away. He did not defend himself again. He answered every question she asked, stayed out of her room, and sent written requests instead of instructions. Each courtesy should have helped. Instead, it made the absence of trust more painful. By sunset, their plan produced its first result. Grace found a duplicate employment form in the records office showing that Emily's original application had been requested by Thomas Vale 3 months earlier. Someone had studied her mother's maiden name long before the license appeared. This proved selection, Emily said, spreading the documents across the tower library table. Not enough, Mason replied. Vale can claim it was routine background research. Then we connect him to the moon vault. Adrian stood at the far end of the table, giving Emily the space she had demanded. The service tunnel record does that. Only partially, Emily said. We need the payment source or the person who helped him inside the royal household. A knock interrupted them. One of Mason's guards entered with a sealed message. He handed it to Emily rather than Adrian. That detail warned her before she read a single word. The message was from her mother. Emily's hands began to shake. Her mother had been removed from her home under an emergency debt order and taken to the Eastern District Courthouse. The order carried Emily's signature. I never signed this, she whispered. Adrian crossed the room before catching himself. He stopped several feet away. Let me see. She handed him the page. His expression turned cold. It is a forgery. That will not matter until someone proves it. Mason was already issuing orders to verify the courthouse and send protection. Another guard arrived before he finished. Grace had disappeared from her guest room. On her desk lay a confession bearing her name. It claimed Emily had planned the license scheme for weeks, used Grace to gain access, and intended to secure the crown in exchange for clearing her family's debts. Emily read the confession once, then again. The language sounded formal, but one sentence struck her like a blow. Emily always knew how to make people help her. It was the exact opposite of the truth, and yet it touched the fear she carried most deeply. What if her kindness was only another kind of manipulation? What if everyone who had trusted her now looked foolish because of it? Grace did not write this, Emily said. I know, Adrian answered. The court will not. Mason took the confession. Victor will present it before we can challenge the signature. Then we stop the hearing, Adrian said. No, Emily's answer came immediately. If you stop it now, Victor will say you are protecting me from evidence. I am protecting you from a rigged proceeding. That is exactly how he wants it to look. Adrian's eyes flashed gold. Your mother has been taken. Your friend is missing. I am finished allowing Hale to dictate the terms. And what will you do? Arrest the council? Close the court? Lock me in this tower while you decide what is best. The moment the words left her, pain crossed his face. Emily regretted them, but not enough to take them back. You still believe I would imprison you, he said quietly. I believe fear makes you control things. And fear makes you disappear into obedience until the choice is already gone. The truth landed between them. Emily's throat tightened. He had seen her wound clearly and used it in anger. Perhaps he realized it at once, because his expression changed. Emily, I should not have said that. But the damage had already reached the oldest part of her. The part that remembered every person who called her dependable when they meant compliant. The part that believed her value disappeared the moment she became difficult. You are right, she said. I keep waiting for someone else to tell me what the acceptable choice is. That is not what I meant. It is what happened. She looked at the confession, the forged debt order, and the sealed court notice. Victor had not attacked her body. He had attacked the identity she had only just begun to rebuild. The competent clerk. The woman whose no mattered. The person Adrian claimed to trust. By morning, the kingdom would see a desperate debtor who had tricked a king. Everything she had earned during the grain investigation would become proof that she had been calculating all along. I am leaving the palace, she said. Adrian went still. No, the word came from him before restraint could soften it. Emily almost laughed. There it is. He closed his eyes briefly. I am asking you not to go. I need to find Grace. Mason will find her. Grace is missing because of me. Because of Hale. Because she stood beside me. Adrian stepped closer, then stopped again. If you walk outside these walls, he will use you. He is already using me. She removed the silver protection ring from her finger and set it on the table. The small sound it made seemed louder than the court bells. Adrian looked at the ring, then at her bare hand. Do not do this because you think leaving proves you are free. I am doing it. Because staying under your protection allows Victor to define me as your possession. You are not my possession. Then let me leave. The silence stretched. Every instinct in Adrian fought the request. Emily could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the gold gathering at the edges of his eyes, and the mark on his wrist burning brighter. For one terrible second, she thought he would refuse. Then he stepped aside. Mason will assign guards at a distance. No uniforms. Agreed. No orders unless I ask. His jaw tightened. Agreed. Emily picked up her coat. She had reached the door when Adrian spoke again. If you dissolve the bond tomorrow, my wolf may become unstable. She turned. He had finally said it without using the danger as leverage. Are you telling me because you want me to stay? I am telling you because you asked for every fact. His voice was rougher now. What you do with it must be yours. The honesty hurt more than pleading would have. Emily wanted to cross the room. She wanted to tell him she did not wish to lose him. Instead, she said, then you should prepare for the possibility that I choose freedom. Adrian's face went still. I already have. Outside the palace, the city felt colder than she remembered. Mason's plainclothes guards remained half a block behind while Emily followed the address on her mother's order toward the eastern courthouse. The building was closed. No prisoner transfer had been recorded. Her mother had never arrived. Another false trail. Emily stood beneath the stone arch, staring at the forged document until the ink blurred. She had lost the palace, the protection ring, Grace, her mother's safety, and the fragile trust between herself and Adrian. She felt exactly as she had in the records office beneath Mr. Bell's disappointed stare, small, useful only when obedient, and one refusal away from being abandoned. A carriage stopped at the curb. Princess Caroline stepped out alone. Emily stiffened. If you are here to tell me I ruined your alliance, choose another night. I am here because Victor used my carriage authorization, Caroline said. And because I know where Grace is. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. Caroline handed her a folded warehouse invoice. My family's Eastern mill does not make the paper used in those messages. Victor purchased the watermark plates 6 months ago and copied our stock. Emily scanned the invoice. At the bottom was Thomas Vale's signature and a delivery location near the old grain warehouses. Why help me? Because Victor promised my father control of Silvercrest if I married Adrian. When Adrian refused, Victor needed another path. Caroline's expression hardened. I was never his ally. I was his first intended tool. Emily looked at the warehouse address. A choice opened before her, narrow but real. She could return to the palace, hand the evidence to Adrian, and let royal power take over. Or she could continue the pattern Victor had never expected her to break, a clerk following details no one else respected. Grace is being held there? Emily asked. For now. Victor plans to move her before dawn. Emily folded the invoice and slipped it into her coat. Then we do not wait for dawn. Caroline looked toward the distant palace towers. Are you going to tell the king? Emily thought of Adrian stepping aside when every instinct told him to hold her. She thought of the rule they had both broken and the choice he had finally returned. Not yet, she said. First, we make sure this is my decision. Emily did not enter the warehouse through the front door. She studied the delivery invoice under a street lamp, compared the lot number with the grain records she had memorized, and found the service entrance listed for tax inspections. Caroline used her family seal to open the outer gate. Inside, rows of empty storage bins stretched beneath a high timber roof. Grace sat in a locked office near the loading platform, frightened but unharmed, guarded by two men who surrendered the moment Caroline announced that royal officers were already on the way. Emily freed Grace herself. You came without Adrian? Grace asked. I came with evidence. On the office desk lay everything Victor had expected to move before dawn: the original payment ledger, the stolen Moon Vault access seal, the real household schedule, and letters ordering Thomas Vale to place the license in Emily's path. One letter explained the entire design. Victor had discovered the Carter maternal line in an old succession study. He knew Emily's signature might awaken Adrian's dormant license. He arranged the empty folder, Mr. Bell's order, Grace's presence, and even the challenge, believing Emily's need to please others would do the rest. The forged threats and missing grain were meant to drive Adrian into confirming the bond at Moon Court, transferring emergency authority to the council. Emily read the final sentence twice. Miss Carter is predictable. Pressure her, and she will choose whatever preserves the people around her. The insult did not break her this time. It clarified everything. Victor had built his plan around the woman she used to be. By sunrise, the Moon Court was full. Nobles crowded the galleries, citizens filled the square beyond the open doors, and Victor stood before the judges with Grace's false confession in hand. Adrian sat beneath the royal crest, his face unreadable, the silver mark on his wrist burning like moonlight. Emily entered through the public doors beside Grace and Caroline. Whispers swept through the hall. Victor smiled as if her arrival completed his victory. Miss Carter, he said, you have spared us the trouble of finding you. Emily walked to the center of the court. No, I have spared you the trouble of inventing one more lie. She placed the warehouse ledger on the evidence table. Mason appeared behind her with royal clerks carrying sealed boxes. Adrian rose, but Emily looked at him and shook her head once. Let me. He stopped. Then, before the entire kingdom, the Alpha King stepped back and gave the floor to the records clerk everyone had once ignored. Emily explained the false linen entry, the copied Eastern watermark, the altered grain codes, and Thomas Vale's payments. She showed that Victor had stolen food from northern districts to create unrest, then used the same network to move the Moonblood license. Caroline confirmed that her carriage authorization and family watermark had been forged. Grace rejected the confession and identified the men who had threatened Emily's mother. Mason produced the original letters bearing Victor's private cipher. Victor's composure finally cracked. Documents can be manufactured, he said, especially by a clerk desperate to become queen. Emily turned to the judges. Then examine the habits, not the names. She opened Victor's letters beside the forged confession. Every document he dictated uses the phrase emergency necessity. The same spacing appears after every date. The same rightward pressure marks every capital V. He forged signatures, but he never changed the hand that trained his secretary. Margaret Finch stepped forward and confirmed the evidence. The chief judge ordered Victor's council seal removed. His authority ended with a soft click as Mason took it from the table. Victor looked toward Adrian. You cannot allow this. The bond must be confirmed today, or the succession becomes unstable. Adrian descended from the dais. You planned for me to choose power. A king must. Adrian stopped beside Emily. Then today I choose something else. The court clerk brought forward the original Moonblood license. Its silver writing glowed between them. The judge asked whether Adrian intended to confirm the union. Every person in the hall leaned closer. Emily felt the bond pull, warm and familiar, carrying the quiet of his wolf and the ache of everything they might lose. Adrian looked only at her. No, he said. Shock broke across the court. He took the royal pen and signed the dissolution order. The silver band around Emily's wrist began to fade. His own mark flickered violently, and for one moment gold flashed in his eyes. Still, he did not reach for her. This license was activated without informed consent, he declared. No crown, law, bond, or prophecy will be used to claim a person who has not freely chosen. Victor stared at him. You will lose the stabilizing bond. Then I will bear the cost. You may lose the throne. Adrian's voice remained calm. Then the throne was never worth keeping. The license dissolved into gray ash across the table. The pressure in the room vanished. Emily's wrist became bare. She was free. Completely, publicly, undeniably free. Adrian stepped away from her, though the distance clearly hurt him. He had made his choice without demanding hers in return. That was when Emily understood the final truth. The magic had recognized possibility, not ownership. Victor had created the accident, but he had not created the trust that followed. The bond had calmed Adrian's wolf, yet love had grown in every moment he listened, waited, remembered, and finally released her. Emily turned to the court. Counselor Victor Hale used royal law to manufacture consent, stole from the people he served, and treated every person in this room as a tool. He believed I would always choose fear. She looked directly at him. He was wrong. The judges ordered Victor removed from office and held for trial on fraud, conspiracy, theft, and unlawful coercion. Thomas Vale's cooperation reduced the remaining network to names and accounts. Mr. Bell was dismissed from the records office for falsifying transfers and assisting the scheme. The same hall that might have condemned Emily now listened while she explained how the law had failed. When she finished, Adrian stood several feet away. No bond connecting them, no legal claim remaining. He held a clean sheet of paper with no royal seal and no hidden clause. Emily Carter, he said, and the entire court fell silent. I will not ask you to answer today. I will not ask you to save my wolf, protect my crown, or fulfill a law. I am asking whether, when you are ready, I may court you as a man who has much to repair and more to learn. Emily thought of the signing room, where her name had once been used against her. She thought of Mr. Bell calling her dependable, Victor calling her predictable, and Adrian standing before a kingdom willing to lose everything rather than keep her without consent. She walked toward him because nothing compelled her. You may, she said. Adrian's breath left him slowly. Emily took the blank paper from his hand, turned it over, and placed it back against his chest. But this time, we write the terms together. 1 month later, the bells of Silvercrest rang again before sunrise, but this time Emily was already awake. She stood in the restored Moon Archive wearing a simple ivory dress she had chosen. Herself, with Grace beside her, Caroline serving as witness, and Margaret holding the new marriage register. Adrian waited across the table without touching the pen. He had kept every promise. Victor Hale had been stripped of office and sentenced by the royal court to repay the stolen grain funds through the sale of his estates before serving a permanent term of confinement. Thomas Vale testified against the remaining conspirators and was removed from public service. Mr. Bell lost his position, while Grace became deputy director of the Royal Records Office and immediately ended the practice of assigning one employee another person's work without written approval. Caroline returned east as Silvercrest's first independent trade ambassador, no longer treated as a political bride. Emily's mother was brought safely to the palace, her forged debt order cancelled. Her brother's loan was legally separated from Emily's name, but she refused Adrian's offer to erase it by royal command. Instead, she used her recovered wages and a new salary as director of public records to settle only what she had truly owed. The difference mattered. Across the kingdom, the old moon blood law was abolished. Every royal and civilian marriage now required two independent declarations of consent, made on separate days, with either person free to withdraw without punishment. Adrian changed too. He still commanded armies and silenced council chambers with a look, but he no longer confused protection with control. When his wolf became restless, he asked Emily for help. Sometimes she gave it. Sometimes she told him she needed space. Both answers were accepted. Their courtship had lasted 4 weeks, not because law required it, but because Emily wanted time to discover what remained when magic, danger, and public pressure were gone. What remained was Adrian bringing her chicken soup when she forgot lunch, Emily correcting his trade reports in red ink, long walks through the northern markets, and quiet evenings in the library where neither of them needed to fill every silence. Now Margaret placed a blank license between them. Adrian signed first, then set the pen down. The line beneath his name remained empty. "The last time you held that pen," he said, "you thought courage meant doing something reckless." Emily smiled. "I had poor teachers. And now?" She looked through the archive windows as the first light of dawn reached the city. 1 month earlier, she had stood on a balcony in a nightgown while strangers decided what her signature meant. Today, no crowd waited below. No council watched. No magic glowed around her wrist. Adrian simply waited for her answer. Emily picked up the pen. "Now I know courage can also mean saying no." His expression softened. "And what are you saying today?" She signed her name slowly, without laughter, pressure, or fear. "Yes." Adrian did not claim her. He offered his hand. Emily took it. Later, when they stepped onto the same balcony where the kingdom had first seen her frightened and confused, the bells rang beneath a clear morning sky. Emily stood beside Adrian as Queen of Silvercrest, not because a hidden law had chosen her, and not because a powerful man needed her. She stood there because she had learned that love did not disappear when she set a boundary, that usefulness was not the price of belonging, and that the right person would never fear her freedom. Below them, the crowd cheered. Adrian glanced at her before speaking, silently asking permission. Emily nodded. Only then did he announce their marriage after the choice had already been entirely hers.